when my clients start composting and they think it's going to be this challenging or expensive, time-consuming thing, they're shocked at how easy it is. You can start a worm bin system called vermiculture if you don't have a lot of space, or you even just have a little corner of your kitchen.
You can have the worms in the kitchen.
Yeah, and I know it sounds odd to people. Why would I want worms in my kitchen? What waste a worm eats up is about 35 times more nutritious for our soil when it exits the worm.
Well, very often women ask me about relationships in terms of, how can I get this guy to commit? And one of the things I say very often is,
Today, changing the world starts at home in the kitchen. Deborah Eden Tull, author of The Natural Kitchen, joins us. And then Dr. Gilda, the country music doctor, is back for more relationship advice. But up first, Deborah Eden Tull. Great to have you here today, Deborah.
Great to be here.
Nice to meet you. So, you say that changing the world starts at home in the kitchen.
Yeah, my book, The Natural Kitchen, Your Guide to the Sustainable Food Revolution, really helps to coach people through the whole process of the A to Z of bringing sustainability into our kitchens. So there's been a growing awareness about organics and why to choose organics, but there's so much beyond that that people are just starting to become aware of. Everything from how to create zero waste in our kitchens to what is green menu planning and eating seasonally.
Then why don't you take us through some of those? How about the zero garbage, zero waste?
Yeah. The book teaches people about the principles of sustainability and how to bring those principles into our kitchen. And one of them is conscious disposal of resources. So we can be so focused in our society on production, and then we just toss things in the trash without really thinking. So the book teaches people how to take a few different steps from creating what I call a radical recycling center, which is really going beyond just the idea of recycling to looking at how can we find creative reuses for as many resources as possible that come into our kitchens.
Can you give us some examples?
Sure, yeah. In my own kitchen, for instance, I'm always finding uses for things like cardboard packaging that I might have. I even turn them into file boxes and menus for meals and things. I'm a gardener, so I'll use things like leftover yogurt containers to be plant protectors, barriers for integrated pest management when I'm gardening. A whole bunch of materials that we use that we don't need to just toss. And then when we're cooking, there's so much that we can do just to be less wasteful of our food in preparation.
Such as?
Well, oftentimes people just buy this sort of pre-packaged vegetables, and maybe they'll just buy the tops of the broccoli, the florets. But I like to go to the farmer's market or join a community-supported agriculture system, basically buy the produce as it comes whole, and then learn to use the tops of the broccoli, the whole stalk.
So what do you do with the stalk?
Well, I like to peel it, and then I can either chop that up for a stir fry or salad. I can eat it raw. Then the peel, I'll make sure that that becomes stock for soup, which is really easy to make. When I'm all done with everything that I'm cooking, I have a place for compost. So just composting can cut down on trash by 50%.
Now, what do you need to do composting? I mean, do you need like a huge spot in the backyard, or how do you do this?
No, composting is really a lot easier than people think. And I'm a sustainability coach, so one of the things I always notice is that when my clients start composting and they think it's going to be this challenging or expensive, time-consuming thing, they're shocked at how easy it is, and they love what it produces and how much that helps their either house plants or garden. So really, if you have a large yard, you can start a big compost pile or get a compost bin. The city of LA even sells them very cheaply. Or you can start a worm bin system called vermiculture if you don't have a lot of space, or you even just have a little corner of your kitchen you could use.
So how big, when you're saying in the backyard though, or these bins, how big is the bigger?
Maybe about the size of your regular recycling bin or a large trash can.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so not too much space.
Or you can have the worms in the kitchen.
Yeah, and I know it sounds odd to people. Why would I want worms in my kitchen? But it's a really nice compact system. You can either create yourself or buy a worm bin. and they don't take a lot of space. And what waste a worm eats up is about 35 times more nutritious for our soil when it exits the worm. And so it's a really great way to add healthy nutrients to our soil.
So you kind of get your own fertilizer out of it too.
Yeah. So it's something I recommend for everyone to be doing.
Were there other things along the line of waste that you were talking about during cooking?
Absolutely. We're so used to, in our society, just assuming that there has to be waste, assuming that we have to be creating trash. And we absolutely don't. We can create our whole kitchen to be producing zero waste if we want. So starting
zero
with
waste.
Buying at a bulk bin, bringing our own containers to the markets that sell rice and beans and nuts.
I noticed that. Are more stores doing that these days? When I went home, went to the store with my parents, and if you brought your own bag, it was free or something, but you had to pay if you took one of their bags or something, which I didn't realize.
Now more stores are starting to have bulk bins, which is great. But even if you live somewhere where there's not, you can simply make much wiser choices around packaging. If you have a commitment that you've made personally to zero waste because you find that it makes you feel so much better at the end of a day, if you're not just creating a lot of unconscious trash, then you'll simply learn which products can I buy that are packaged much more simply, this kind of rice or this kind. And you just have to do a little bit of investigation.
Now are we talking things, like cardboard versus plastic, or what?
Yeah, sure. Even if you're buying spaghetti sauce, though I have a whole section in my book on recommending the things people can make their own. But if you do buy that, why not buy it in a glass jar that you can then use in your kitchen for storing food, as glass is one of the safest storage containers, instead of plastic that you're then going to recycle or
So glass
toss.
is actually good.
Yeah. And people forget that, while recycling is such a step up from just trash, even recycling requires energy and water and such. So we want to just be as conscious as we can about
Well, that's why
using.
sometimes now you'll hear about, I think we hear about electric cars and they'll say, oh, well then you need the coal plant to make the electricity or something, or the nuclear energy. So people are looking more at the whole system these days instead of just a portion of it.
Yeah, and that's really important. There's going green in general has a lot of gray areas that we run into. It's not like a set of rules, but when we really learn the principles of sustainability, which so many of us, especially in cities, didn't grow up aware of, then we know how to navigate those gray areas. And how do we navigate those questions as we're purchasing food, as we're cooking, all of that.
And you had just moved back to LA, which was what kind of got you started on this here in the big city, right? Because you were living, on like in a retreat or sanctuary? Or?
I was, just before returning to LA, I was a Zen Buddhist monk for about 7 years. In an incredible sustainable community up in Northern California. And it was quite a shock to move back to an environment like Los Angeles after that. And before that, I had also spent, it really was a shock. And I had spent many years just really living close to land and growing my own food and living more sustainably. So for me, the question was, how am I going to apply what I've learned and how I want to live, because it makes me feel so much better, so much healthier. It's just so much more joyful. How am I going to apply that in a place like LA?
We'll be right back with Deborah Eden Tull. Her book is The Natural Kitchen. And we are back with Deborah Eden Tull. She's author of The Natural Kitchen. Well, I know you really practice what you preach, but I was just thinking you may be the first Zen Buddhist monk I've really met. I've been to Thailand, I've been to, but anyway, so. But here in California, I guess I didn't even realize that there's really a colony here in California.
Yes, there are. Yeah. So it was an interesting practice opportunity, it's what I'll call it, to move back to LA and just have the challenge of how to learn how to really apply living peacefully and living consciously here in the belly of the beast, right?
You can say that again.
Yeah. So I started Creative Green Sustainability Coaching to really help teach people what some of these tools are that I found so useful And one of the most popular workshops that came from that was the Sustainable Kitchen, and that's what the book was born out of, because the kitchen is really the hearth of our homes, and food is such an important part of our daily lives. So if we really learn to use mealtime as an opportunity for being more conscious, for mindfulness, for making new choices, if we do that successfully with food and in our kitchens, it pretty quickly spreads to the rest of our lives.
Oh, sure. And that's the
Yeah.
thing, because, even though going green is much more in the air and talked about, and I think people, a lot of different ways are much more conscious in doing it these days.
Yeah.
But yet, again, maybe you think it's a big deal or a certain buying this or that or recycling, but anyway, but it can be something just as basic in your kitchen every day with, so that's kind of an interesting way of approaching it.
Yeah, and it can be as basic as how we approach eating our meals too.
Such as?
The concept of mindful eating, and how often we eat our meals in a rush. We just kind of fit in our meal tightly between work and more work.
It's easy to get caught up in that grind or that cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So really using meal times as an opportunity to get more present to our lives and to our bodies. Then we naturally make wiser choices from that. We enjoy ourselves more.
So what do you mean by that in particular? How do you do that, let's say, in the course of a meal? Are you, meditating, or, or how do you actually?
Yeah, you could say that I use mealtime as an opportunity for meditation. Yeah, and it might just be that I'm really paying attention as I prepare my food and getting present and not double tasking and talking on the phone while shooting someone an email while listening
on Facebook,
because we have a choice. We're so just trained to live in a society where we always have to double task and rush and everything's about convenience, but it doesn't necessarily create a quality of life that's very peaceful or enjoyable. So to remember that we have the choice.
Yeah, I think most people in the big city will believe you when you say that. So that's the real peaceful part. Menu planning, you say, though, can be a big part of this.
Yeah, well, the challenge is to live in a city like this, as you're saying, everyone is so busy. And so it's very convenient and easy to just go out and buy packaged prepared food, right, when I need it, and to get my lunch in throwaway containers every day quickly at work. But if we set aside a weekly time, I like to do it every Sunday, for menu planning for the week, to really look at what are my needs this week, what's my schedule, and if I actually have an intention to be living more sustainably, then I actually want to create a menu for myself that matches that. So I want to have really healthy seasonal snacks on hand, so I don't have to rush and buy packaged foods every day, right? I want to have things on hand for really easy to make, delicious, nourishing meals, so I don't have to, eat out all the time.
And do you think it's easy for people to actually do that, or does it seem like a big deal? I've got to plan the whole week in advance.
I create in the book. I really offer a system and tools for people to do that in a way that I think is very simple. It's just taking a little bit of time for yourself on a Sunday. I also take cooking preparation time for an hour or maybe 2 on a Sunday, but it pays off so much because you feel so well taken care of during the week. You feel like you don't have to compromise your values. If sustainability is one of your values, you just feel healthier. You're just enjoying life more.
Well, and indeed, you carry this over to shopping. When you're out shopping for food, how does this play a part?
Yeah, well, I like to offer people just 5 simple guidelines for food shopping. And in my workshops, I teach each of these guidelines in more detail. But basically, the first one is to ask yourself as you're shopping, is this organic? We all know so much more about organics now, but it's really the first priority. And
is it pretty straightforward these days about what it actually is organic or not, or are there any things to be aware of? That
there are a lot of gray areas I find around organics, but most important is that I want to know that my produce is grown without pesticides, herbicides, or fungicides. So even if I go to a farmer's market and something is not labeled organic, it might be that the farmer couldn't afford the certification. But if you speak with the farmer in person, you might find out that they are not using pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and that in fact they're practicing sustainable organic farming. So that's number one. And for people on a limited budget, which so many people are these days, the next question is this a food that it's necessary to buy organic? So there's a list of the dirty dozen, and the clean 15, the dirty dozen being the most important foods to buy organic.
Can you give us an example of something that you don't need to buy organic, that maybe people think you do need to buy organic?
Sure. On the list of the clean 15 might be things like garlic and onions in the allium family. They have really thick skins, and those plants actually have natural pesticides built into them, so that there's going to be barely anything used on them when they're growing, right, as opposed to another pesticide-intensive crop. So that's helpful to know about. And then the next question would be asking ourselves, is this local? Is this locally grown? So there are some people today committing to like 50-mile radius diets or 100-mile radius diet.
Now, is that just because if it has to be transported, then it has to be preserved, or?
Yeah. You know, they say that the amount of gasoline most of us use each year, to double that for how much gasoline it takes for your food to get to you.
Wow, okay.
So more local the better, and we're so lucky here in Southern California.
A lot of farmers markets in town.
Yeah, it's really growing. And then the next question would be, can I buy this with the least amount of packaging, which we spoke about a few minutes ago, but again, buying bulk or choosing my packaging really specifically.
And the manufacturers are getting more conscious about that these days. I mean, I know like even McDonald's, you know, I think switched to different kinds of containers. I'm assuming you probably don't go to McDonald's very often.
No,
but you know, but even that kind of a thing is changing.
Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, and I just encourage people to really be conscious and ask the right questions, not make assumptions, because sometimes there are even gray areas around the packaging that we want to support and not. So, but there are more options for biodegradable packaging, which is great. The next question would be, can I support the farmer directly in some way? So again, if I can shop at the farmer's market, that's ideal, or support a community-supported agriculture system, where I actually buy shares into the farm and get a great delivery, a box.
So some kind of like a co-op or something?
Yeah, that's kind of what it is, and that's really fun.
Well, we're almost out of time, but one thing I did want to ask you about was the monks and the bananas.
Sure. Well, that's a little story from the monastery where I trained, and it's a story that matches a situation a lot of people run into, which is, how do I navigate when there's something I need to maybe let go of in my diet, but I want to do it in a kind way. So for instance, at the monastery where I trained, at some point we found out that, you know, banana production really was not happening in a way that matched our values, in a way that we could support any longer. But we're really gourmet cooks there, and we love bananas in our cooking or our breakfast cereal or whatever. So, you know, we could have just said, let's cut these out completely. And instead, we decided to find a middle way, which is what I encourage people to do. Because if you cut something out before you're ready to, you might pick it back up again. So we decided, okay, we'll cut bananas out of our menu, but when we have special retreats, we'll still bring them in and buy them organically, which we can only afford now and then for our special dishes like that. And that was finding a nice middle way that worked for everyone. And after some time, actually, Chiquita Banana Company ended up changing its practices, so they were able to produce affordable for us bananas that actually they had won awards for their new practices regarding sustainability.
I was waiting for you to say you had grown your own, but I guess if Chiquita's doing it,
not in Northern California, well, at least.
Well, thank you very much, Deborah Eden Tull. The book is The Natural Kitchen. It all starts at home. We'll be right back. And we are back. Joining me now is Dr. Gilda Carl. Pleasure to have you back again today.
Pleasure.
The country music doctor with her Country Cures. So you're a relationship expert, or you do a column for Match.com.
Yes, I write the Ask Dr. Gilda column for Match.com.
And I know people are always writing you, asking you all kinds of questions. So I thought it'd be fun to go through some of those today and just have you tell us what people are asking and what you're telling them to do.
Well, very often women ask me about relationships in terms of, how can I get this guy to commit? And one of the things I say very often is, you can't make anybody commit. You know, he has to want
Probably
to do
made
it
him make him run the other way, right? The more you
well, that's what happens. The more you push, the more you try to pull, the more he disappears. And I get people to understand that they have to bet on themselves. I wrote this book called Don't Bet, on the prince.
Oh, that's right.
How to have the man you want by betting on yourself. And
but it's not. It almost sounds a little unromantic when you say that. But you say it's not against the love. You're just telling them, but
right.
not to. Don't look for the car. Look for the love.
That's exactly right. I don't say don't love the prince. I say don't bet on the prince for your sustenance, for your financial support, for anything, because princes leave, princes die, princes have their own issues. And what you have to do is look in the mirror and say...
Especially if they're a celebrity prince, but that's another story.
Oh, I've dated some of them.
Oh. Oh, well, actually, this could be a good segment.
No, we're not going there.
Maybe we could do for somebody else what, they did for Tiger Woods and Jesse James.
Yeah, I'm doing that for them now. No, what you have to do is understand that you have to bet on yourself. You look in the mirror and you say, what is it about me that is so inviting and so enticing? And make sure you accentuate that, whether you're a male or a female. And one of the things I do as the country music doctor is suggest people listen to Taylor Swift's song, Love Story. Oh. And, I said this...
I should have you sing a few bars.
No,
please,
you don't want me to sing a few bars. But she talks about, and we're never going to make it together, but people say, but that's okay. We're going to survive. And the thing is, she says, you're going to save me. You're going to rescue me. There ain't no prince out there who's going to rescue any woman. And by the same token, there's no woman out there who's going to rescue any man. Because now equal opportunity exists and the guys want the same kind of treatment. Nobody rescues anybody. And this is the advice that I give.
What does that mean, though? Is romance dead?
No, romance is wonderful, but you got to rescue yourself. When two whole people come together, it makes a big difference, as opposed to, oh, take care of me, I need you, do this for me, do that for me, because you're only setting yourself up for disappointment. And he or she is never going to meet those kinds of expectations. So get real.
Well, when you mentioned the self-confidence thing, though, it's funny when you said that, you made me think of something. Another guest, I just read a book, was talking about this woman that he worked with, who in her mind was just so hot, and in his opinion, he probably wasn't, but he said she was so successful with the way she carried herself, thinking she was hot. The guys actually went for it, and she was getting hit on all the time, even though she probably wasn't quite all that, but there was just something about that confidence that it actually...
A confidence, I think, is far better than competence. And I say in one of my Gildograms, I love you is spelled with a capital I. If you have a lowercase I when you're saying, oh, I love you, I mean, who do you think you're going to attract? You're going to attract somebody who is similarly walking around with a lowercase I. Now you're dealing with two lowercase losers finding each other and depending upon one another to make their lives better for each other. It doesn't happen. It can't happen.
So what you need are two egomaniacs.
No!
Love me.
No. When I love him and he loves him, that's not going to work either.
Oh.
So that will cancel itself out.
But now, you seem, in a way, even though you're the modern, I mean, you're the professor, but you still seem kind of like old school, or can I say an old-fashioned kind of girl?
I am old school. I really do believe in respect and honor and love, but I do believe that the love has to begin with loving yourself.
Well, the reason I want to ask you this, is love or money? Do you marry the guy for love or for money?
Oh, is that even a question?
Because, well, for some people, it's the other answer. It's not the one that you think.
50% of our population is divorcing,
exactly.
Of course. And those people who marry for money are very disillusioned in the end to find out that he is a cheap SOB, or he's not parting with his money that is set aside for his children, or I mean, that's
or until
the
he
wrong
finds
thing.
the next
Or yeah, the
You know,
next
at the next-
20-year-old,
Yeah.
if that's what he's into.
Yeah.
No, it's all about love. And I was the love doc on MTV Online for years, and and I told people this again and again and again. And now I've just taken all of my information and knowledge and experience from all the people out there who have written to me and all the people I've counseled, and I've applied it to the country music venue. And it's wonderful. Now producers are talking to me about doing a television show on this.
I think
and a radio show on this.
Great idea.
It's wonderful.
Because it's a fun way, a fresh way of approaching it too.
And we need fresh ways. We need fresh for everything.
Well, because sometimes it's kind of a downer, when you hear a lot of the people will tell you, that love is just dopamine or something, and so it's kind of nice that you're having.
It is. It is. I mean, there are chemical manifestations that occur. I mean, that does happen. But you have to be in the right place at the right time with the right mentality.
But you get more dopamine with the country music.
Oh, as far as I'm concerned, yeah. I paid extra on my cable service to get country music coming into
You'd be perfect for the country music channel.
I know, I ought to tell them that.
We'll tell them that right now.
The interesting thing about being such a devotee of country music is that I'm a New Yorker, which is
a New Yorker?
I'm a New Yorker. And this is so interesting because everybody thinks you have to talk with a twang to love country music. But in the age when there is so much crossover and so much desire, and there's so much desire for country getting out there in the mainstream, duh.
So how did a New Yorker fall into country music? Because shouldn't you?
Right. I was wearing a T-shirt, a country music T-shirt one day in New York, and somebody said, "What's that?" I said, "Country music." She said, "But you're a New Yorker." I said, "So?"
Not the most popular radio station in town?
We have no radio stations that are country in New York.
Really? I believe that.
That's really pitiful.
But there are some here in LA?
There's one major one here in LA, and the rest of the country knows what they're doing. The rest of the country
and that's the thing, it really is more of a heartland kind of.
It is heartland, and I love the heartland because those people are real. I mean, on either coast, we're getting extremes of one kind or another kind, but the heartland has people talking about what's going on in their lives. I particularly love country music because the men are men who say, "I'm hurting, I'm sorry, I did wrong." And Blake Shelton, for example.
Oh. And see, I don't even know who that is, but I'll look it up.
He wrote a song called "She Wouldn't Be Gone," and he wrote about, if I had been less selfish and less self-involved and more into her. And here's this big, strapping, gorgeous-looking guy saying...
With the cowboy hat.
Yeah.
See, I do. They all have a cowboy hat.
Yeah, they all have cowboy hats. She wouldn't be gone. And why am I screaming at the windshield and talking to everybody I know? She wouldn't be gone if I had been a better man. And how many men in our culture, certainly on this coast or that coast, how many men can honestly say, "I messed up"? Now, as far as I'm concerned as a psychotherapist, if somebody says, "I messed up," that's the beginning of growth. And that's where we can start working. I have more men contacting me on my website, Dr.Gilda.com. I have more men contacting me than ever before.
Interesting. But still more women, or is it
no,
more guys?
Now I'm getting 50-50.
Really?
This
Wow.
was never the case. Years ago, it was probably 98% women.
Guys
and
are talking
2%.
about their feelings
Guys
now.
are finally talking.
Hey, I'm going to do a relationship show.
Okay. Okay, talk about your feelings.
Well, thanks a million,
Oh,
Dr.
it's
Gilda
my
Carl, the
pleasure.
country music doctor. Her CD is Country Cures. You'll have to come back sometime and give us more country music advice for the
I would love
lovelorn.
Oh, for sure.
Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.